With the big upcoming release of GenerateBlocks 2.0, I've been diving into the beta versions and trying out the new query block. Now, it's quite a bit different from the existing query loop block that you've been using on previous versions of GenerateBlocks. So I wanted to do a really quick explainer video to just dissect the different pieces to it that are new to make sure you understand which one you should be editing for what. It took me a little bit to get used to it as I'm trying to understand how each of those pieces work. So let's dive right in and take a look. All right, so I've got a test site up using GenerateBlocks 2.0 beta 9. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and insert a container and then insert a inner container just for the heck of it. And we're going to put in the new query block. So this one is narrowed down to just be called query instead of query loop. So you want to make sure you understand the difference there and don't mistakenly choose the core query loop block that we're not going to be using. So when we select that, we're again presented with a layout to start with. I'm going to go ahead and just choose the first one, which is title, date, and excerpt. All right. So now we've inserted the new query block, and when we open up the query block, we're going to see three new blocks here that we're going to need to dissect and understand what each of them does and which one you should be editing for what. So first is this outermost query block. This one is essentially like the past one that we've been used to, where you're going to utilize the same settings to choose what you're wanting to query. Do you want to query posts? Do you want to query pages? Whatever it is you're wanting to query and show in your query loop, this is where you're going to choose those options. Now, after you choose what you're wanting to query, you do have the option to set up some different styles for this outermost query container. And so I kind of look at these as like three different containers, right? This is the most outer one. It's going to you're telling it what you want to query. And then you can even style this as a whole. So all of these blocks that live within this outer query block, you can style in a way. So if we wanted to say background and put in a light gray background color, it's going to put in that background color across the entire container of all of these blocks. So that's our looper, our pagination, as well as the no results. Now, as we go one step further and look at the looper block, this block is going to dictate the layout of your query loops. So if you're wanting this to be 2 columns, 3 columns, whatever that specific type of layout and how you want them to be visually seen, that's where you're going to use the looper block to dictate that. So if you come to looper block, choose the settings cog here on the left, and they give you some preset options here using grid that you can filter through. So you can do a 2 column with 3-1 layout. We could do a even 3 column layout, which we'll choose that one for this example as we're talking. And then you can also choose your tag name on that looper. Now, if we jump into the Styles tab of the looper block, this is where we're going to manipulate the settings so that we can fix the layout of our looper items. So we can do things like add column gap. So we can put in 40 pixels there of gaps. So now that's going to separate our looper items by an additional 40 pixels. Row gap, you can increase 40, 80, whatever you might want to do there. Now keep in mind, these settings are not controlling the actual individual content within the looper itself. This is really affecting the entire section that holds the loop. So if we were to change the background color on this particular block to a darker gray, you see our original lighter gray encompassed the entire section of blocks within the query. This one is actually just the looper section. And so when you're editing the styles, you want to keep that in mind, that you're affecting the entire section, not the individual post queries themselves. We'll go ahead and clear this back out. And next, we'll jump into an individual loop item. Now, as you can see, when I choose that loop item, it automatically outlines the container, so to speak, holding the content for our loop. And so, again, as I mentioned earlier, I like to look at these as three different containers. So this is the outermost container holding everything within the query. This is the looper that holds the content that you're querying. Now, the loop item is actually holding the individual content and copy with individual loop item. And so this one is if you want to change the layout of your content within your loop item. You can choose flex, you can choose grid, whatever it might be. So now if we go in and put a new background color on our looper item, we can go ahead and see now you understand the looper item is the individual containers holding that content. So all the edits that we're making in the loop item styles tab is going to affect everything inside of that loop item individually. So if you wanted to change the gap in between these loop items, that's going to take place in the looper because that's what's holding those individual containers and dictating their row and column gaps. Now, if you wanted to change the way that the spacing was in between your content and your headings within, that's going to be in your loop item. All right, so then the next items in our query block found in GenerateBlocks 2.0 is the options for pagination as well as no results. And so you technically can delete these out. They come in through with one of the templates that I chose. And so if you delete that out and you do want it back, you can come back to the main query block at the top and you can insert those here in the block settings. So they have add pagination, inserted that new container, and if we go back, we could say no results. All right, so remember, think of these like three individual nested containers. We got the outer query container, which is going to hold our information about what we're wanting to query, what we want to show. Second is the layout of our query, so that whether we want 3 columns, we want 2 columns, a single column, gaps in between, right? A background encompassing all of them, background color. Any of those types of settings are going to take place in that second looper container. And the third one is our individual loop items that hold our actual content. So background color, padding around our loop items, spacing in between the content and alignment, changing the direction of your content. All of those things are going to take place in that third lowermost container, which is the loop item. So as I said, when I kind of first dove into this new query block, it had me a bit confused understanding what each of these new blocks exactly do within the query. I hope you found it useful in kind of breaking down each of those blocks. Because each of them have their own style tabs, it can be confusing of which one you need to use to style what you're looking for. In future videos, I'll be looking to show you how you can style and design query loops using GenerateBlocks 2.0. So stay tuned for future videos and be sure to subscribe to my channel to hear about them first. Thanks a lot.